Despite their popularity of consistently being a top 10 to 15 watch brand in the industry, Tag Heuer has become rather polarizing in the last few decades. No matter your take on the brand, it's most likely safe to say that the majority of enthusiasts have a developed opinion in one way or another. For myself personally, I've always struggled with mixed feelings about the brand, which I can get into in this video. Yet recently, I have noticed a change that has led me to somewhat evolve in my opinion of the brand. In this video, we look at the complicated case of Tag Heuer. Some of their previous potential missteps, their involved history that can stack up with the best of them, and the recent developments why I believe they might be onto something special with their new direction. Let's jump in. Now, Tag Heuer is a brand of multiple eras and a history that can compete with the best of them in the industry, with the Heuer name dating back to 1860 in Switzerland. An early innovator in the arena of chronographs and especially dashboard instruments for motorsports, Heuer's legend really took off in the mid-20th century with the release of legendary models such as the Octavia in 1962 and the Carrera in 1963. Both motorsports-inspired chronographs with manual winding movements that served as some of history's most iconic designs. The leader at the helm during this era was Jack Heuer, the great-grandson of the company's founder, whose aim was to carry on the family name. In the late 1960s, Heuer joined the race to develop the first automatic chronograph, partnering with brands like Hamilton and Breitling, ultimately releasing their automatic chronos in 1969 with Heuer equipping the Octavia and the Carrera families with automatic variants, while also introducing the now emblematic Monaco, the brand's square case racing chronograph. Even viewing these contributions alone, Heuer has as much history, heritage, and iconic design language to lean on as anyone in modern watchmaking. So where did things start to go potentially wrong? In a story you've probably heard before, the rising production of quartz timepieces from places like Japan during the 1970s upheavaled the foundation of brands like Heuer. Most companies downsized, laid off employees, and shuttered altogether as they rushed to adapt to the increasingly battery-powered world of watchmaking, with the industry shrinking by 60% in the coming decade. Heuer ultimately survived, responding with a broad range of digital and quartz-powered models that perform well enough in terms of sales, while deviating from the established aesthetic language of the brand's mid-century golden era of design. Fast forward to 1985, Heuer was purchased by Technique des Avant-Garde and became Tag Heuer. By the 1990s, Tag Heuer scaled massively, especially in the United States, as even today, I would estimate they are still a top 5 most recognizable Swiss watch name in the United States. This growth unfortunately did impact the brand's image in the minds of purists and those that had fond memories of the heyday of the 1960s boom for the brand, as the product focus shifted to more fashion-oriented pieces that could scale in the mass market. The catalog became truly massive, largely oriented around quartz, and leaned heavily into the types of designs you think of when you imagine the 80s and 90s for the brand. Models like the Formula One collection really defining what I'm referring to here. In 1999, LVMH, the world's now largest luxury conglomerate, purchased Tag Heuer in an effort to expand the group's luxury watchmaking presence, which at the time was essentially non-existent. In the years to follow, the heavily commercialized product continued, with massive expansion of models like the Aqua Racer, which I must admit I do think are great-looking, mass-appealing watches, and the development of their own manufacture movements, which did have their own stumbles along the way, with the initial release of the 1887 movement being suspiciously similar in its base architecture to a Seiko caliber, leading to some controversy. The 2010s was also an interesting time for Tag Heuer. Jean-Christophe Babin, now at Bulgari, and the legendary Jean-Claude Biver both helped to shepherd the brand in a much better direction with regard to enthusiast appeal and increased focus on in-house movements, including the Caliber 02 released in 2016. But you could also sense during this time that they were still trying to find their identity, with some of those quests going on towards the arena of smartwatches, which of course were booming during this period, which safe to say the purists of traditional Heuer were not much of a fan of. Yet despite the strides, I think for collectors as well, another point of contention was what was going on around them in that $2,000 to $5,000 segment. The traditional and revered players like Longines remained, especially performing well in select markets, while brands like Breitling, Omega, and Rolex sat just above at the top end of the collection, with their entry-level offerings starting to appear. Another new development was the emergence emergence of brands like Tudor, who went from essentially being a non-existent brand to a top 15 Swiss watch brand in just a decade, unquestionably eating up part of the market share. Though an entirely different approach, another brand that of course quickly rose and is occupying part of this segment is Grand Seiko, spreading its independent wings in the last 5 to 10 years and being a name to reckon with throughout the industry. This idea is even furthered by rising independent brands such as Oris, Nomos, Bell & Ross, Zinn, and others, that despite not being as sizable, expanded and gave consumers with money to spend on a watch options that simply either were not available or not viable in decades prior. Collectively, the competitive landscape in a short period of time has undergone immense changes, putting even more pressure on brands like Tag Heuer, who call it home and really have to raise the bar in the process. However, in the last 24 months, there has been some stirring up at LVMH watch division. Hublot and Bulgari, despite their more distinctive designs, are undoubtedly big names in the industry and have been consistent in scale. Bulgari's Octo Finissimo has solidified itself as one of the most innovative and unique watch releases of this past decade. And we can all say what we want about Hublot, but they have an audience, and it's a large one at that, as they are still ranked 12th in the Swiss watch industry based on turnover, according to Morgan Stanley and Lux Consult's report. Zenith has really changed their pace as well with new leadership, and their Chronomaster collection and revival pieces have been very well received across the board. And although on a much smaller scale, yet emblematic of the change in direction here, Daniel Roth and Gerald Genta, names in the independent sphere that LVMH came to acquire, have announced new plans for growth. And with Tag Heuer recently, although not perfect, there appears to be way more attention to reestablishing the brand's revered image with model releases like the Octavias, the Carrera limited edition models, the Carrera glass box editions, their new Monacos, and most recently with the Skipper, now being introduced into standardized production. Now, a huge part of the success of any company or organizational units comes down to the support at the top. What appears clear to me is that Bernard Arnault has directed way more attention to the watchmaking and jewelry part of his business. If the name Bernard Arnault doesn't ring any bells, he is the CEO of LVMH, rapidly expanding his growing empire since the 1980s, and nowadays is battling back and forth with Elon Musk as being the two wealthiest men on the planet, with a net worth eclipsing $220 billion at the time of recording this video. The main reason for bringing Arnault up is that recently two of his children, Frederick and Jean, have taken on roles as CEOs of watch companies within the LVMH portfolio. The youngest, Jean, now leads the Louis Vuitton watch division, with LV clearly looking to redesign what they are doing from a high watchmaking standpoint by tapping their new high-end manufacturing arm in La Fabrique du Temps. And although it is an uphill battle to get serious purist collectors to look in their direction, I think comparing something like their brazen and more ostentatious pieces with something like their latest collections, which is at least a step in a better direction in order for the fashion house to be considered as a real player in the watchmaking world. Frederick Arnault, who has been CEO of Tag Heuer since 2020, has had the brand in its time have some notable releases, as we mentioned, refine its points of sale, and to slim down the collection to be more centrally focused. Now, I know some of you are watching this and maybe thinking, okay, Teddy, I came here for a take on Tag Heuer, not a profile on one of the world's richest families. However, I think this is important when looking at the health of Tag Heuer, and it also gives a sense to why the brand is hitting the target more than it was, say, 10 years ago or so. It is very clear to me that the Arnault family is being more aggressive in their watch division, with Tag being arguably their most important one to get right. With models like the Skipper, Glassbox, Monaco, Octavias, and much more work being done with the Aqua Racer family, it's pretty clear that beyond the mass market approach, there is a better pulse being tracked for what collectors and lovers of former Heuer would want to see. Although it is impossible to know Bernard Arnault's thought process, it does appear he is positioning his children to one day lead LVMH. But in order to do that, they need to cut their teeth at different parts of the business, having success in the process. LVMH is an organization that no doubt is resented by many for a variety of reasons. But for those that are merely concerned about seeing better watches being produced, the last 24 months of Tag Heuer I find to be relatively encouraging. Part of my long-standing feelings towards Tag Heuer have been summed up as something along the lines of They make perfectly fine watches and even have splashes of brilliance when they're able to tastefully position both outward design and movement technology that is informed by past characteristics of former Heuer in a modern package. But the unfortunate reality is I found the consistency of hitting the mark in this regard is less frequent than other brands in their price tier, and in turn creating better points of value in the process by looking elsewhere. Yet given the tumultuous environment that we have been really undergoing in the past few years in watches, it looks like we might be entering a crossroads for Tag Heuer, where this potential return to form that aligns with enthusiast collector interests could be more than simply a once in a blue moon occurrence. There's certainly a lot of work that needs to be done, but really what made me want to create this video was seeing two back-to-back kind of head-turning releases from Tag, most notably with the glass box release of the Carrera at Watches and Wonders, because that was one of my favorite releases of the entire show, and it was very much unexpected. It had the right case size that was in alignment with, I would say, most purists of the brand would want to see. It had a design that was more than just the limited edition Carreras that we have seen over and over, which we will never get tired of, but still at the same time, it'd be nice to see something that could be more mass produced and be something of a newer execution rather than always looking to the past. And then to follow that up directly after with the Skipper and then see some of these other areas that they're filling in the gaps, I'm more optimistic than I have been for Tag Heuer. They've always had their hits to the outfield here and there, and I want to be clear, they do produce some very solid watches, but they've always been more of a mixed bag. At the time of recording this video, it just feels a bit different than maybe it did in the past. It seems like there's more consistency happening from a product standpoint, which at the core of it is the most important thing to get right for any brand. I don't care what your history is, it is very much an industry of what have you done for me lately as well. All of that has to be factored into the equation. How this will ultimately continue to unfold, well, we'll just have to wait and see. But all right, guys, that is my take here on Tag Heuer and the current status of the brand. What are your thoughts? Are you sensing a bit of a change like I am in the brand's direction and just more focus on product and being more consistently driven to a wide variety of consumers? Yes, you have the mass market appeal, but it does seem that the purists and the enthusiasts, the collectors, the backbone of many of these brands that allowed them to originally get to these heights is now being answered to a bit more in the instance of Tag Heuer than it was years ago. Love to hear your take down below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that as well. Also, check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. How we're able to fund all of our productions on this channel is through selling watches on our site. So if you are in the market for a watch, we would absolutely love to have your business. We know you can buy a watch essentially anywhere nowadays, but that allows us to keep doing what we're doing here, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.